In the spring of 2009, one of the largest trucking companies in America filed for bankruptcy. It had 40,000 trucks on the road. It had survived recessions, fuel crises, and a decade of brutal competition. It had taken 50 years to build. And it almost disappeared in 18 months. This is the story of how it was built, and why almost no one else could have done it. Jerry Moyes was 23 years old when his father handed him a truck and pointed him south toward Phoenix. No investors. No business plan. One customer, one route, steel in from Los Angeles, cotton back west on the return leg. The company he registered was called Common Market. The year was 1966. Most people who start with one truck end with one truck. Moyes treated it as an opening move. By 1968 he had acquired the name and assets of a small regional carrier called Swift Transportation. By 1972, the two operations had merged. By 1978, the fleet stood at 25 trucks. Modest on the surface. Extraordinary in context, because anyone who has spent time inside this industry knows what growing even to 25 trucks actually requires. Here is what trucking looks like from the inside. Operating margins run between 2 and 6%. 2 to 6 cents on every dollar, before an engine blows, before a serious accident, before diesel prices spike faster than your contracts allow you to recover. You are not running a business with a cushion. You are running a business where a single bad month can erase 6 good ones. Then there is the driver problem. Annual turnover at large carriers regularly exceeds 100%. That is not a statistic. That is a dispatcher getting a call on a Friday night that a driver quit in Amarillo, a load needs to be in Memphis by Monday, and there is nobody available to move it. That is a safety manager spending half her week recruiting people to replace people who just left for a competitor offering 1 cent more per mile. Every departure is a recruiting cost, a training cost, and a gap in capacity that has to be filled immediately, because an empty truck does not stop costing money just because there is nobody behind the wheel. And at the center of all of it, a structural trap that breaks most companies before they ever get close to scale. The bigger you are, the more efficiently you can operate, better fuel pricing, better load matching, lower cost per repair. But getting big enough to unlock those advantages requires surviving years of operating without them. That gap is where most carriers disappear. Jerry Moyes understood this trap. His entire strategy was built around one answer: move faster than the trap can close. Between 1990 and 1999, Swift grew at more than 20% per year, compounded, for a full decade. Not a trucking growth rate. A technology company growth rate, achieved in one of the most unforgiving industries in the country. Swift went public on NASDAQ in 1990, not a victory lap, a financing mechanism. Capital for the next acquisition. Then the next. Then the one after that. Each deal added not just trucks but lanes, customers, and density. The network became more valuable with every new node. And that was the strategy most people missed entirely. It was never about fleet size. It was about becoming impossible to replace. When a major retailer builds its entire distribution schedule around your trucks, your lanes, your drivers, your on-time record, switching away from you costs more in disruption than any competitor's lower rate can justify. That kind of lock-in is not written into a contract. It is built by the driver who shows up on time in January in a snowstorm in Ohio. By the dispatcher who calls at 2 in the morning to reroute around a closure and still makes the delivery window. By the maintenance crew that keeps a truck on the road that should probably be in the shop. Year after year. Lane after lane. Until your absence becomes unthinkable. By 1999, Swift crossed $1 billion in revenue. One truck to $1 billion in 33 years. In 2001, Swift made the move that changed its strategic profile entirely, the acquisition of MS Carriers, a major Memphis-based operator. What MS Carriers brought was intermodal, freight in standardized containers moving between truck and rail without unpacking. The concept was not new. Drivers had been watching trailers get loaded onto flat cars since the 1950s. But by the late 1990s, the economics had shifted. Long-haul lanes that used to belong entirely to trucks were increasingly moving to rail for the middle leg, cheaper per mile, more consistent on fuel. The carriers that figured out how to connect both ends of that journey, truck to rail and rail to truck, were building something that pure truckload carriers could not match on price. By absorbing MS Carriers, Swift was not just getting bigger. It was getting harder to displace. Then came 2007. Then came the decision that nearly ended everything. Swift took the company private in a leveraged buyout, loading the balance sheet with debt at the exact moment before one of the worst economic collapses in modern American history. When 2008 hit, freight volumes fell fast. Shippers delayed shipments, renegotiated contracts, cut everything they could. Rates compressed. And Swift, carrying heavy debt and a 2 to 6% margin business, felt every fraction of that pressure with a force that threatened to become fatal. The company that had taken 50 years to build had roughly 18 months to survive. In the terminals, loads sat. Drivers were let go. In dispatch offices where people had spent years building something they were proud of, the mood was something nobody who worked through it would forget. This was not an abstraction on a balance sheet. These were jobs. Routes. Relationships built over a decade with shippers who were now on the phone asking questions nobody had good answers to. In 2009, Swift filed for bankruptcy. Not liquidation, a structured reorganization, a controlled reduction of the debt load. But make no mistake about what that moment was, the edge. The place where companies either find their footing or disappear entirely. Swift found its footing. It emerged from restructuring, stabilized operations, and in 2010 went public again, raising over $900 million in one of the largest trucking IPOs in American history. The turnaround was not a miracle. It was a demonstration of exactly what the company had always been, a network built deep enough and embedded enough that even a near-fatal financial crisis could not fully unravel it. Jerry Moyes stepped back from leadership in stages. In 2017, Swift merged with Knight Transportation to form Knight Swift Transportation Holdings, one of the largest full truckload carriers in North America. The one-truck operation that started with a route, a customer, and a prayer in 1966 had become an institution. What separated Moyes from the thousands of other people who entered trucking and stayed small was not access to better technology. Not a more favorable market. Not luck alone. It was the willingness to treat a low-margin, unglamorous, operationally punishing business as a platform for serious scale, and the discipline to keep executing that belief across 5 decades without losing the thread. He did not pivot when freight became unfashionable. He did not chase Silicon Valley's promises about autonomous trucks arriving next Tuesday. He understood that in trucking, the edge is not found in the idea. It is found in 10,000 decisions made every day: how to deploy a truck, retain a driver, price a lane, manage a shipper relationship in its 3rd difficult year. The edge is operational. And it compounds in ways that outsiders never see coming until the numbers are impossible to ignore. But here is what the numbers never capture. Behind every truck in Swift's fleet was a driver who left home on Sunday and did not know exactly when they were coming back. A dispatcher who learned the name of every driver on their board, who knew which ones had kids in school and which ones needed to be home for a wedding in October. A mechanic who fixed the same engine problem at 2 a.m. in a truck stop outside Flagstaff because the load couldn't wait and the driver needed to roll. The people who built Swift, the people who built every major carrier in this country, did not appear in press releases. They did not get mentioned when the billion-dollar revenue milestone was announced. Most of them probably heard about it secondhand, if at all. But they knew what they had built. And they knew, the way you only know something when you have done it, that what looks simple from the outside is anything but. That keeping America moving is a job that gets done in the dark, in the cold, in the middle of nowhere, by people who show up anyway. Jerry Moyes built a necessary company. But necessary companies are built by necessary people. And every single one of them knew it, even when nobody else was paying attention.